it will be shown now. Actually, it just popped up.
Oh,
it's now shown on the top.
I'm just starting the live stream, so we are live in.
Oh,
it's now shown on the top.
I'm just starting the live stream, so we are live in. So now it's up and running.
okay.
So please be aware of what you are, how you behave. Yeah, can you see our live stream? I like it. I like to be in public. But now I will switch off my camera and
Yeah.
but let's wait maybe for another minute. So anybody else to be promoted to a panel participant?
I think not for the moment. If someone shows up in between, I will just write you a direct message.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, now it's 1:30.
Okay. Then let's start. Hello and a very warm welcome to the second day of the virtual edition of our conference and hackathon, Exchange Reality, exploring the future of current challenges with augmented and virtual reality. So we started yesterday with an interesting keynote and also an interesting discussion about I lost it. Thomas, help me.
About digital humanities versus digital humanism. So I don't know who of you followed the NetSPAD yesterday. And before the NetSPAD, actually, we had a keynote on open data and open knowledge, actually, how to promote this and how this can help and support people in the Americas, especially in Middle and Southern America, to support education there.
Thank you. You already saw now my co-organizer, Thomas Moser. We are both heads of different research groups. I'm the head of the research group Media Creation. Thomas is the head of digital technologies, and we're both in the Institute for Creative Media Technologies at the St. Pölten University of Applied Sciences. Well, the streaming part is an interdisciplinary approach and examines the state of art within AR, VR, XR, mixed realities from different angles. And you can see already all the speakers we have on the podium. So we will have 3 talks, each 20 minutes, and a discussion afterwards. So if you have any questions, please find the chat, write it to the chat, and we will discuss it then after each talk at the podium. Today in the morning session of Exchange Reality, we had a hackathon organized by Silvia Petrovic-Meyer and the Open GLAM initiative. And we already had very interesting questions about augmented virtual reality, museums, architecture, storytelling, audio, etc., etc. So I think this theme of our first streaming session fits perfectly also to those questions because it's XR for museums and cultural heritage. And let's introduce our first speaker, Gerhard Sprung. He's a lecturer at the University of Applied Sciences, FH Joanneum. He has a current focus on interactive 3D applications, usability, accessibility, documentation, digital post-production, multi-touch interfaces, and so on and so forth. He will present a paper. It's called IFAR or IFAR. It's a mobile AR for cultural heritage. And the co-author of this paper is Agnesa Haxer, also from the University of Applied Sciences, FH Joanneum. Gerhard, I'm very happy that you are here.
Yes, I'm happy to present this paper too. Actually, it's a work in progress I want to present here. So it's a short paper. And I had this idea half a year ago, and I was really happy to have the possibility to make a prototype. And I have this, my students, Agnesa Haxer, makes her master's thesis with this. And to present this work in progress, I made a little video, which I want to present now. And afterwards, I would be happy if there are questions, so we can discuss all these things, the possibilities, the problems, whatever you want. So I will share my screen to present this short video. Welcome to my talk about our project IFAR, which stands for Interactive Full-Size AR. In particular, I want to talk about our work in progress we call Mobile AR for Cultural Heritage. Here we see a picture of some remaining parts of the castle in Graz. This is in Styria. I always wondered how it looked like 150 years ago. You can see a plan on the right side showing the abandoned buildings that existed exactly where today politicians park their cars. Often it is hard or even impossible to imagine what a historic site looked like in the past. Such an experience would be immensely helpful in conveying the importance of historical events or helping one to develop an opinion concerning urban planning decisions. In order to achieve such experiences, usually interactive PC applications or virtual reality experiences are developed. But both have severe limitations, like the inability of exploring such a situation on site or together with other participants. With our approach, we will develop an application for mobile devices, like smartphones or tablets, to look through an AR window into the past or into a possible future. Interested individuals will be able to use it while walking around on a large site and be able to interact with non-player characters as well as avatars of other participants. They should be able to look at non-existent objects, buildings, and other environments from different angles. Additionally, they should be able to interact with them or even change them. Let me try to define AR and VR. In 1994, Milgram and Kishino defined the virtuality continuum as the span between a real environment and a virtual environment. Everything between these two poles was called mixed reality. In this definition, augmented reality enhances and extends reality without replacing it completely. As the term was defined differently by several companies in the last years, its usage frequently leads to confusion. Phony and others therefore introduced a 4D coordinate system to categorize different approaches. The axes describe the interactivity, automatism, precision and visual consistency, and the degree of virtuality. While there is no generally accepted term for the type of technology we intend to use, we will use mobile augmented reality, or mobile AR in the following to describe a partial overlay of the real image with computer-generated, preferably three-dimensional objects, depending on location and position, using a smartphone or a similar mobile device. There are several questions that have to be tackled before implementing such a system in a cultural heritage site or museum. One field of research is the accuracy and reliability of inside-out tracking methods, as provided by mobile phones equipped with ARKit or AR Toolkit. The question is how well these techniques work in situations where many moving objects like cars and other visitors are interfering. Additionally, it has to be researched if it is possible to display the other participants on the AR screen of a mobile device convincingly and accurately as avatars, and to adapt the user's movement and gestures to the avatar. In VR and AR, social interaction is expected to bring added value to the user's experience. Social applications like VR chat are already widespread for VR devices. Interaction with non-player characters like Der sprechende Kälte and playful elements like in the Neanderthal app have been combined with location-based AR applications. Let me now describe our application. With the help of mobile devices capable of using SLAM, it has become possible to offer a window into a virtual or past reality with tablets and mobile phones. With this method, visitors can be offered a look into the past. We designed a mobile AR application for Android and iOS smartphones that can show the demolished parts of the castle by looking through the device like a window. It is possible to walk around the whole site and look at the buildings from all sides. The Graz castle was chosen as the content of the prototype because it is historically interesting, and due to the partial destruction in the 19th century, it seems to be a perfect example of how historical buildings can be made visible again. The Castle of Graz was recognized as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1999. Parts of the castle even go back to the 14th century. Large parts of the castle were demolished in 1853 and only parts were preserved. Parts like the early Renaissance portal leading to the inner courtyard, a work of Domenico Dell'Alio, have been abandoned. We are using Unity as developing platform, AR Foundation as a platform-independent library to implement AR functionality, and Photon Engine to implement multi-user tracking and real-time interaction in AR. The users join a so-called room and can move themselves and the smartphone and look through the screen into another time. There they can see abandoned buildings in place, occluding the image of existing objects. The players can interact with objects in the scene, for example, view, push or collect them by focusing or touching. In this view, they can also see the avatars of others who are currently in the same room. The other players are represented by avatars located exactly where the real users are. The other participants are integrated into the AR storytelling as historically dressed avatars. One can interact with others and is forced to work together with them to perform certain tasks and unlock achievements. It is possible to chat with these persons via a chat function, either privately or in a common chat room which is visible to all users in the room. Non-player characters can appear and talk to the players, so headphones are recommended, and tell them about the historical events and assign tasks to them which have then to be solved either alone or in collaboration with other persons in the room. It is possible to combine these tasks with other locations where similar applications were provided. As you have seen, not all features were shown in the video. This is partly due to the organizational restrictions we had in the last weeks. At the moment, our prototype is capable of showing the castle, switching between times, and recalibrating itself. Other users are already shown as avatars similar to what you have seen in the video. Above the heads, an icon shows if they are communicating with you, and you can touch them on the screen to send a message. Also, it is possible to place simple objects in the scene, and these objects are seen and manipulated by the other participants. Non-player characters are already available. The long-term goal of our research activities is to assess the usability of mobile AR using SLAM with user-owned devices, so-called bring your own device. Another point to be investigated is how we can improve the experience by adapting the image on the screen to the real vision of the user. By using personal devices, we try to avoid the obstacles that teachers and museums usually face, like the prohibitive acquisition costs of devices, maintenance, insurance, and much more. Compared to VR devices, we can eliminate the need for cables, high-end computers, and tracking devices. In addition, we create the possibility of interacting with other participants, walking around and exploring everything from different angles. An important point to investigate in the future will be how to improve the immersion in mobile AR. As you have seen, there is a difference between the shown image and the real image. This is due to the fact that the AR software expects the user's face exactly in a predefined distance perpendicular to the screen. We intend to search solutions to this problem in the next year. Also, we will especially look at the impact for sensitizing visitors to historical content and the importance of dealing responsibly with historical buildings and ensembles. The social interaction and the acceptance of the activities have to be tested along with the technical restrictions and the accuracy of the tracking. In addition to the visualization of the historical buildings at a predefined historical date, we introduce and test activities to improve the emotional connection with history and the understanding of the processes. Based on the results, solutions for simple design of such applications, conclusions about acceptance and sustainability, and other areas of application such as urban planning and tourism shall be described. Hopefully, we can contribute to a future where AR applications can help students understand the importance of historical events as well as enable urban planners to better present and discuss their visions to those involved on-site and in full scale. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I hope it was okay for you to see and hear yourself. It's always a little bit an issue when playing a video. Yes, we have already a question from the chat. Shall we start with that?
Of course, yes.
Okay,
Please.
so Wolfgang Einer, the ICMT head, says, thank you very much for presenting this very interesting work. And he says, how do you get camera image and physical space in sync outdoors for objects that are further away?
We do not sync the object itself. It's this SLAM technology that modern, the best mobile phones like the new iOS devices or the new Android devices have. They are capable of orienting themselves in space via using the camera. So they record the image. I guess the audio is worse, I think.
No, it's good.
It's good.
It's good, okay. So this SLAM technology uses the image that the camera records to calculate where the camera is. So it's only necessary that you have some objects in the near surrounding where the camera can orient itself, and the objects far away, they are synchronized automatically. So I'm not recognizing the church. The mobile phone is recognizing the cobblestones in front of me. So this is the technique behind this calibration.
Mm-hmm. Wolfgang also asked, maybe you had already also told us that this in your answer, is there a calibration step needed when starting the app?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
First, the mobile phone has to know where it is exactly. We have several approaches. The first approach was to put a QR code at an exactly defined place on site. Mm. So, for example, on the entrance in the gate of the castle. And when you start the application by scanning the QR device, the QR sign, it is absolutely clear where the mobile phone is, in which direction it is looking. So I can calibrate this whole scene around it, and at least for the next 10 minutes, I can go around, and the mobile phone knows exactly where it is and shows everything on the right place. Mm. After some minutes, the calibration gets worse. And this is something we want to improve by connecting storytelling with recalibration. So we will create tasks where the people have to scan another QR code, for example, or be on a certain place. And when we know that the person is exactly in this place, we can recalibrate the scene. And then we have another 10 minutes where the accuracy is enough to give a good experience.
Mm-hmm. I think this is like a very good, how do you say? My English is not very good today. Überleitung.
It's like a good link, good link to the next question. Let me jump in for you, Franziska, here.
Again,
so the next question actually is a bit related to the storytelling. So a question by Clemens asking you whether you can tell a bit more about how the story behind the application looks like, and also what storytelling techniques were used. For example, how do the tasks, for example, look like that had to be done in the application?
Yeah, this is something we are working at, but we wanted to first to tackle the technical problems and have a working prototype. The idea is that you are on site, then non-player characters like the emperor looks out of the window, tells you something you have to do, and this should be tasks that can be, on the one hand, not done alone. So you have to search another person that is playing with you at the same time, the same place. And you have to bring a message somewhere. You have to move an object, which is possible. We can put some objects in the scene. And when you are in front of the object, you can, by pushing on the screen, destroy, move, change this object, and this is one of the tasks. So we have no story yet. This is depending on which time we will concentrate on. We have not decided if we take the time when all these buildings were destroyed, so in 1850, or one of the high times where the emperor was sitting in the castle. So we have to decide this. We are thinking about the principles, what a story must contain, so that we can recalibrate the device. We can bring the users together in a useful way. So it's nothing artificial, but they should have the feeling that they are really working together on a task. And the next step is that this application should be not only in one site, but for several sites in Graz. So you can go from the castle to the old towers with the gates of the town, which are also abandoned and demolished. So you can go through Graz and discover new places by making these tasks together.
Okay. Florian typed in a question, so maybe you can ask it yourself.
Yes. So first of all, thanks for your interesting talk. And so my question would go towards the communication modes with avatars. So you told people are typing in, they're clicking on an avatar and then they can type a message. So what is your experience with this mode of communication? Because usually if you see presumably a person in front of you, you would rather talk to that person or use natural voice communication instinctively. And so how do you experience this kind of break of medium when you suddenly have to type?
To be honest, this was the first solution my student came with. My idea originally was that we can let the avatars speak for themselves. So the avatars have different knowledge because they are part of the program, and they could be able to talk in a way like the people have talked 300 years ago. And there are several possibilities and opportunities to use this really creatively and useful to understand the time better. Of course, if I'm just asking how the real person is, her name, for example, it would be senseless to do it with a chat while I'm standing in front of them. But I have several ideas how to use this possibility creatively, and yeah, I hope we have the opportunity in the next time to try some of these possibilities with real people on the side. This was not possible in the last month, so we are behind our schedule.
Yeah, this was also the question from Kerstin Blumenstein. She asked, was it already tested with real users? How did they experience the app?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I cannot answer this because we had no time. All have been postponed, also the work of my student. So I hope in November I can tell you more.
Wonderful. In time when the IconCMT then starts.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, are there any questions from the podium?
Perhaps let me jump in with just a brief technical question. So have you thought about combining not only video, but also combining it with IoT devices, for example, Bluetooth, or, I mean, you mentioned QR codes at the very beginning. Is it just that you need one QR code at the entry point, or do you have QR codes at many different points so that you can also in between the story recalibrate where you're currently at?
For the sake of simplicity, we thought only about having several QR codes in the scene where you can get additional information by scanning the QR code. And for us, technically, we have the possibility to recalibrate the scene there. But of course, if the mobile phones are capable of using IoT devices, it should be possible for every commonly used device. But if this would be possible, of course, it would be useful to have Bluetooth, BLE or something like that to find out where you are, how near you are, and the direction and all these things. GPS is not accurate enough, so we have to find something else.
Okay, there is one last question maybe. This is a similar question that I also had in mind from Daniel Domberger. Does all of the data come from manually remodeling, just from pictures, or do publicly available models exist somewhere? So this was also a question maybe I add on. I mean, you have some pictures, of course, from, let's say, until the 1900s, but what do you do with the models from before? How do you get those?
Thank you for this great question. It is a great question, of course. What I have done is I did a lot of research for old pictures, and luckily the castle, the Graz castle, was photographed a short time before the demolishing. But with other buildings like the Paulustor and so on, there are no pictures showing it in the surrounding like it looks like today. So it's really hard to reconstruct them. And as far as I know, there is no database or 3D objects already available. So we have to make them ourselves from pictures, from graphics, no photos from the older buildings. So we have to work with historians together to reconstruct them.
Okay, there's okay, now the questions are coming. Maybe we have a little bit of time. Did you think about scanning historical models, or did you do something like that?
I tried to let me say that as a part of the Graz castle is yet standing there, I tried to use photogrammetry techniques to scan the real building, but it's more work to reduce and optimize this data than to rebuild it myself. So what possibly could be available are historical models, because in Graz there are some parts of the city modeled, I guess it's 200 years old model. So the Schlossberg and so on is, there are models in the museum. So we could try to use these models, but they are not accurate enough to give a real good experience when you are standing in front of it.
Okay, maybe
perhaps one last question. Actually, what's possible that we, after our session, we can still stay on the podium if the people have time to discuss more issues. I mean, just perhaps one last question from the audience. So, how do you deal with data that needs to be stored to create the XR environment? The question is whether this really takes a lot of storage actually on the user device or not. What's your experience?
Anna, is this your question?
Yeah, this is actually from the Q&A section. Anna took it out. It was also where I found it. So do you have any experience regarding storage, Gerhard?
Yes, of course. It depends on how well the model is done. So it's the same question when I'm creating a 3D game. I can do it just somehow. It looks great, but using it in a VR device or in a real-time environment, the system is getting slower and slower. And so I had to make several models, and then I tried to reduce the faces to reduce the quality of the mappings and so on, and use all these techniques usually used for real-time environments, and it's a lot of work. So, but it's necessary because if it has to fit on a mobile phone, and not only fit, but you have to download it somewhere, possibly in on site. So we have to keep it small, and we have to define how much quality, how much and compare it to the size of the file, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerhard. You can see lots of questions with lots of interesting questions. And yeah, maybe we'll have time after all the talks. But let's go to the next talk. The podium also got larger in the meanwhile. The talk is called Gamifying the Museological Experiences. And it will be a video played by Antonio Coelho, senior researcher by the University of Porto. He's focused on the areas of computer graphics, virtual reality, and procedural modeling, also serious games. And Maria Fontella, she's a web and graphic designer responsible for conceptualizing, visualizing, creating, and managing the production of multimedia applications for several museums, and also member of the University of Porto. And it's a paper together with Pedro Cardoso, Liliana Santos, Roberto Vaz, and José Raimundo. And Liliana and Roberto are also here. Hello, welcome to Austria, kind of. And so I'm happy to have you all here, and I'm also very curious about the discussions afterwards. Okay, so I think we decided that that we will play the video.
Alexandra, can you please start the video?
Hello, my name is António Coelho. I am associate professor at Faculdade de Engenharia da Universidade do Porto, and also I coordinate the computer graphics and virtual reality area at INESTEC. In this work, we're going to present some gamifying approaches to the museological experience. This work was developed at the Graphics Interaction and Gaming Group at the University of Porto. This presentation will be done by me, my colleague Pedro Cardoso from the Fine Arts faculty, and 4 researchers at the doctoral program in digital media: Maria Van Zeller, Liliana Santos, José Raimundo, and Roberto Vaz. In this presentation, we'll explore 4 different examples. So the first one will be gamification in a boat museum. Second one is a location-based games in natural parks. The third example is the use of location-based games in museums, in this case, a botanical garden. And finally, we'll talk about accessibility for the visually impaired visitors. In the first example, we integrated augmented reality and also the concept of sticker album collection as a framework for gamification in informal learning in museums. So this was conducted in a boat museum. And the motivation from this work was the engagement that people have towards the sticker album collections. From our childhood, we always have these collections, and the way it promotes completion and engage people to complete the collection. So we would like to engage the learner to collect the stickers and progress in the exploration of the museum. And we also focused on an augmented reality layer that could enhance the experience of exploring the cultural heritage, in this case the boats, by providing additional information. So, one of the major issues in museums is that normally heritage cannot be modified. So we should not use marks in AR, but instead use markerless AR, which of course is a little bit more difficult, but still approachable. Unless, of course, in an art gallery, where most of the exhibitions are 2D, two-dimensional, the paintings. In other exhibitions, these artifacts are normally three-dimensional, which also poses some problems to the augmented reality calibration and markers. So we would like, with this approach, to use heritage as an anchor to support informal learning. So, as a gamification approach, we use the player's journey. So in the first phase, the onboarding, we want to engage the player into playing the game. And then, in the second phase, scaffolding, we provide the player an intuitive progression until we reach the end of the game, where we provide the player with mastery. So in the onboarding phase, the visitor would install the app, select the language, and then a video would introduce the story and the goals of that experience. Then, after his registration or her registration, in the login, he could choose a theme layout and the avatar. This would enable a more historic theme for adult visitors and a children theme for infants. And in this phase, at the end of this phase, we give the visitor the first sticker. This will engage the visitor to complete the second and the third and so on, motivating the user to progress. So here is the album where a first sticker is provided, and then we should only unlock the second sticker to complete this first boat. In the second phase, scaffolding, we provide short and iterative cycles. This motivates progression as small iterations. So in each room, we select one of the boats, and then, following this diagram, we provide some empty slots for the stickers, and then the first challenge would be the identification of a part of the boat with augmented reality. Some help would be provided if people would not succeed at the first approach. And unlocking the first sticker would give us information about the boat. At the second challenge, we'd have a quiz, and then the second sticker would be unlocked. By unlocking the second sticker, we would have more information, but now in multimedia support. And finally, a 3D animation of the building of the boat. And at the end of each completed boat, we have a 3D model of that boat. So in the end of the game, we would like to recognize and reward the effort of the visitor. So a captain certificate would be awarded, and the app could be taken home, not only with the stickers, but also with the 3D models of the boats. So we could show people even with using augmented reality at home.
The second example is location-based games in parks, the case of Gaia's Biological Park. Gaia's Biological Park is a nature park in the north of Portugal that we have chosen as our locus of research because, since it simulates and preserves the typical landscape of the region, it has a good potential for the development of serious location-based games. We want to promote and disseminate the natural heritage while enriching the visitor's experience. To do that, we developed a prototype of a mobile app to be used in that park. The prototype has a map with points of interest, the user's location in real time, geotagged information, and serious games about the contexts the visitors are experiencing. These images show the general aspect of this prototype, with the points of interest on the map. And on the right, one example of those points, where you can see a photo and some information. And now, I'll present a video where you can see what I've talked about in more detail. With the app, one could search for all the animal species found throughout the park. To complete a collection, once you unlock new species, you can learn more about them. Also, you can unlock thematic mini-games as you walk around, that you can play as many times as you want to strive for higher scores. Unlocked content can also be checked out later in the comfort of your home.
The third case study occurred in the University of Porto's Botanical Garden, which was the home of the celebrated Portuguese writer Sofia de Mello Briner Henderson, and had a relevant influence on her work. In our perspective, a visit to this garden is incomplete without acknowledging the complementing facets that characterize this site: literature, botany, and history. This prototype is a location-based game experience that articulates botany with Sofia's famous story, The Bronze Boy. Beaconing stands for breaking educational barriers with contextualized, perversive, and gameful learning. It is an ubiquitous technological platform involving user experience design, mobile communication, location, and context-aware systems, gamified pedagogy, and analytics. Educators use integrated authoring tool to develop autonomous gamified learning activities using both learning resources and the context of participating institutions. Lessons focus on STEAM, cover formal and informal subjects, and target real problem solving through mobile applications. After deployment, analytics are used for assessment.
The methodology used started with a brainstorm session with a group of 6 people, master and PhD students and professors. We made exploratory visits with the garden team. Those were very welcome and necessary to build a proper experience. Like it is possible to see in the flowchart, the project has a narrative with points of interest, which have a minigame. The minigames included different mechanics like quizzes, shooters, drag and drop, and activities like capture images. For be successful, it is necessary to be a good observer, which minigame have a price. That is a sticker of the point. In the final, it will appear in the inventory screen. During the day of testing, we resorted to participant observers for collecting information from participants while they were playing. The observers acted as facilitators for solving technical issues and identifying unexpected problems in situ. Through these methods and by analyzing player surveys, we concluded that players were engaged with the experience. that was well accepted amongst families and groups of children and teenagers. Learning through a location-based game proved to be a fun and enrichment. However, certain interactions design issues arose from our consideration in future work. In conclusion, navigation in the botanical garden as a zoological space requires visitors to be attentive to their surroundings. It is in those surroundings that is the motive for their visits. Operating a mobile application in these contexts needs to be an experience that does not alienate the visitor from the local itself, but one that promotes a stronger bond between them. The focus of the visitor attention must be on the physical world and not on their smartphones, be it for navigation, information checking activities, or for moments of contemplation. In based learning games, a positive feedback is required on different activities, creating a learning environment motivated by success. So, even failure must contain pertinent information that leads to learning. The success message should reinforce what has been learned. Activities should be directed to in situ observation and shouldn't involve prior knowledge. This allows to broaden the age range of the application, making it possible for different groups.
The fourth example is about the accessibility for the visually impaired visitors. Despite the growing concern about increasing accessibility for people with visual impairments, only 5.5% visit museums in Europe. These patrons represent an important potential market for museums, and implementation of inclusive technologies can help promoting access to exhibitions and museum places. Haptic interfaces allows the exploration of virtual replicas of museum objects through diverse ways of interaction. Those take advantage of the dynamic nature of the kinesthetic sense and allows users to acquire perceptual information of the virtual pieces, like texture, shape, weight, and material properties. It is possible to observe diverse ways of interaction on the three examples presented here, like using an arm exoskeleton, a pen, or a joystick to feel the objects. In the case of touch replicas digitally augmented, is it possible to explore three-dimensional replicas of museum objects? The replicas can be scaled or restored to their original appearance, and tactile exploration is enriched with additional audio information. Tuteco is a project in which people listen to contextual audio information when touching hot points of the replica. In the case of the Egyptian cat sarcophagus, the interaction is very similar, but half of the object was reconstructed as it was at the date of its origin, and the other half remains as it is nowadays. Gesture-based interactive tactile reliefs are useful to provide access to reliefs of artworks like paintings, photos, and images. In this case, users' hands' movements are tracked by computer vision, and it allows better recognition of the visitor's exploration strategies, like if they are using one or multiple fingers, one hand, or both. The first example shows a visitor interacting with the relief of the painting The Kiss, and the second example is a conceptual system for tactile exploration of other reliefs. Technologies are also being used to help visually impaired visitors in indoor navigation and wayfinding in museums. Systems can present step-by-step navigational audio instructions, and people can interact with them by voice comments, touch events, and texts. The example of the Blind Nav app shows two print screens, where people can choose where they want to go on the exhibition and also how to access bedrooms or other services, or live in the museum. The image of the second example shows a blind visitor using a device for navigational instructions on a self-guided tour, which recognizes the user's position according to sensors attached to him and the exhibition walls.
Conclusions and future work. New media and technology must complement and not replace the mission of these institutions. The visitor's experience should be the main drive for technological breakthroughs in museums. Technologies must not distract visitors but enhance their experience with the museum collection. These technologies must promote inclusive museum. Activities should have a straightforward language aligned with the game mechanics. Creative activities should allow the use of diverse tools and the possibility of social sharing. Games must consider different player profiles and their typical emotional involvement. Found objects should inspire curiosity, enthrall, enlighten, and stimulate learning. Information and navigation must operate with accessibility tools of the mobile devices. I thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting and very diverse talk. I mean, it's not easy to fit in like 4 projects in a very short presentation. So I'm very curious about the questions. Maybe let me start with some like basic questions. Is the different applications you presented, are they like in chronological order? Was the one with the boat museum the first one? Or maybe you can tell a little bit what came first and what came later.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Antonio, and yes, the boat was the first approach we have done to a museum, and it raised a lot of questions. And that first, after that, we were involved in the Beacon project, and then we start creating game-based learning activities. So the focus on the natural parks also was parallel to the Beacon project. And so these two, the second and third examples are more or less parallel. And then we have also in parallel the focus on accessibility for the visually impaired, because there's a lot of limitations that can be overcome by technology and design for accessibility to all museums.
Mm-hmm. And so who has which part? Maybe you, because we have so many speakers here, Maria, Liliana, Roberto, what was your part in this project?
So me and Pedro Cardoso, we are professors at engineering and the fine arts faculty, and we are supervising some master and PhD students. And Roberto, Liliana, Jose, and are all in the doctoral program, doing their PhD thesis, and Maria, of course. So this was, we assembled a team to show different ways of how we could address museums from different perspectives. So Maria is focusing on storytelling and games in museums, as Liliana is more focused on the natural park. So in outdoors, location-based games, pervasiveness, and Roberto is quite focused on the visually impaired and accessibility museums, inclusive museums. Jose is also focused on the aesthetics of the games and in different contexts. So this team that we form has different approaches that can be combined. So we try to show you how we try to address different problems different ways, and how also common problems can be addressed commonly. So that was a perspective of how we work in the focus of cultural heritage.
Very interesting. I think there are already questions from the audience. From Arne, is extensive use of AR and games taking the attention away from the real environment art piece and leading to only interaction with the mobile phone, even if the real environment, even in a real environment, for example, in the park?
So let me just start answering the question, and then I can also pass to my colleagues. So one of the main drives for using AR and in this case and location-based games is not to disrupt the attention to the cultural heritage. So if I will go to a museum, for instance, in the first example, in the boats, so all the questions demanded me to go to a boat and see it more carefully, try to explore it, to understand the quiz, and using AR to explore different parts of the boat. So our intention is to focus the user on the collection of the museum and avoid, which is, of course, as the question suggests, is one of the main difficulties, is how to create engaging experience that do not detach us from the main goal, which is the connection to the artifact. Actually, in another work, we experienced an application for storytelling and with children, and at the end, there were more engagement for children using the application, but they didn't pay attention to the museum. So that's one of the problems that may arise. So in all these projects, we have different approaches to focus the game and storytelling on the actual artifacts, cultural artifacts in the museum. So I think Maria and Liana can talk a little more on their experiences in research on these topics.
Yes, in the case of the park, it was a concern to start right from the beginning the design to make people not be distracted. So even the mini games that you can unlock, they are very short. That's why I call them mini games. You can play them in just a few minutes and that's it. And you can move around and you don't even need to play them as you unlock them. You just unlock them and you can choose to play them in that spot or not. But it's not a distracting thing. And also, the games are made, the theme is always what is around the player, the context. And we want the players to focus on what they have around them, to look for details, to find things, etc.
Okay.
And in the beginning game, we have an approach with a story, and the story was the to focus the visitor to the.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Thanks. And the most important is to focus on the content, and the augmented reality can be very useful in the case of the inside of the gallery For example, in the Botanical Park, we have a gallery, and inside we are now making some experience with augmented reality in the inside, and then it's completely different, the form that we act with the visitors, because we can in the interior we can use beacons and we can triangulate with the visitor, but in the outside, like the project that you saw, you have to use GPS, and it is completely different to make an experience with the different spots. And not distract, of course, the visitor.
There are two questions from the audience. I love those projects, all very interesting. I've been wondering if those projects are research projects. Is it possible to read the papers? Maybe let's ask, all the presentations are also papers. So we will release them in a week or so you can read about it, but maybe you can tell us about if those are research projects.
Yes, and also in the paper we have references to these projects with more detail. So we have improved detail in some of the projects, like the boat project and accessibility and the location base. So actually, location base is a sequence of projects. So Liliana has developed a research thesis in an iterative way, so providing different game prototypes in different situations and improving the immersion of the games using the feedback from previous experiences. And that is followed several research papers. So we'll be able to access that. And you have also our contact for more details. So you can always contact us at any time to get more details.
I think as many people will. There is one question, maybe last one. What kind of response do you get from parents who make trips to the museums, gardens with their kids so they don't spend time on their phones, TV and tablets?
Maybe Maria can answer.
Yes, I have children, and it's much more fun to go with children to a place with a tablet that has something to say to them. I experienced that with my family, and it proved to be very different. It's an experience that we can all have our own device, but otherwise we can talk about that. It's a way that I can be all together or not if you don't want. If you have several ages like I have in my family, the kid with 8 years old, it's funny with the apps, and the older one that has 16, he's much more engaged, and I tried that in several spaces, and I believe that is the way to engage families in museums.
Okay, thank you. We didn't get so much to talk about the last project, with the visually impaired visitors, which I think is very, very important. Unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss it now because we have a third presentation, but I would love to discuss it after the third presentation for those who want to stay. But we will go now forward to the third presentation. And we stay in topic. It's about what smart cities may learn from museum education, curated augmented reality storytelling. And it's presented by Florian Wienczek. He's an expert on interface of digital media and cultural learning. And he works at Fluxguide in the areas of digital concept, project management, And he is together with his colleague presenting this paper, who's also an expert at Fluxguide, working on digital concepts and project management as well. And welcome. And I'm very happy to have you here, and please start with your presentation.
Yes, so I will share my screen and we'll do it live and not in a video. So let's see.
Works wonderful.
So now it should be full screen, right? Okay, yeah, thanks a lot for inviting us to the conference and let us show our work. So we will now combine different projects. So on the one hand, the project Holomuse, which was done in the last, let's say, 2 years. And that was really on the topic of augmented reality inside museum spaces and focusing on cultural learning inside museum spaces. And now we have a new set of projects, more going towards smart cities. And that is what Anna will show you in the end. These are still work in progress. They're still in the very beginning. And but we will show how the concept and what we learned from the cultural learning projects can transfer there. And we are working in cultural heritage and in cultural learning quite a bit. So we, as a company, we are also producing mobile applications for museums and cultural institutions. We do a lot of consulting on how to use digital media in learning and knowledge transfer formats. And yeah, we're also doing obviously a lot of research and development in these directions. And so let me start with showing you what we've worked on so far. And so going a little bit back into theory. So nowadays, basically a concept that was already introduced in 2009, Web Squared, says, okay, now we have mobile devices with tons of sensors like cameras, microphone, GPS, gyro sensors, where computers can basically learn about the world through those sensors. The location is getting more and more important. So especially if you think about the concept of net locality, and we think about search, but also experience, information is tied to locations. And also like the world feeds into the web and into networks. And also objects tend to have more and more information shadows that get machine readable, that can be processed. And so, yeah, this kind of information, digital information on the one hand, and the world, the physical world on the other hand, is more and more tied together. And that's what we already learned in the very first talk. And so if you think about experiences, if you think about transferring knowledge, if you think about cultural learning, there the term of holistic experience becomes, for us at least in our work, really important. So on the one hand, we have physical displays, we have physical spaces like cityscapes, like museum galleries, like public space. And on the other hand, we have digital displays in different kinds, be it a computer where at home I can look at an online collection, or at some kind of walkthrough through a gallery, at mirror worlds like Google Street View, or virtual worlds like Second Life, or the like. We have VR headsets, which take me also completely immersively into a virtual world. We have installation pieces which combine physical spaces and augmenting it with projections, with digital information. And then of course, we have augmented reality, mixed reality, which really combines those two and is really at the interface of the physical and the digital. And so it's really important to think those two dimensions together. And in the beginning, they were thought of, okay, we have the physical display and we have the virtual museum, but we can't have this dichotomy anymore. We have to think them together. And I think that is where AR really comes into play as a medium, because it is able to combine these two layers. And so for AR, we have two very dominant reception devices. On the one hand, mobile AR, that is still the most dominant, because a lot of people go around with their smartphones, mobile phones, and especially the newer ones are really working well with AR already. especially since Apple and Google introduced their respective AR kits and AR Core. But we also have glassware, and that is also important to mention because we worked in the project Holomuse on both layers, so on mobile and on glassware, and had a look also where those different reception modes come into play. And so now, how can augmented reality be effectively used for cultural learning? And so a lot of these examples, I will only briefly mention what dimensions there are and then go to our projects because we heard a lot about it already. So we can use AR, for example, to make the invisible data or information or cultural objects visible. And so here you see an example that was used in the Belvedere in the Schiele exhibition, that we suddenly have X-ray images which are overlaid on top of the original paintings. And so making basically the layers behind the paint visible directly at the original. We can bring static objects to life. For example, use a static object as an avatar that can suddenly speak to you. We can show objects in action, especially if you think about technical museums where you have machines, where you're talking about complex processes. You can really show how things work directly at an object or at a place. You can experience possible pasts or possible futures if you think about mediation of architectural history, of mediation in public spaces, where suddenly you can tell stories about how things were possibly at a past, have digital reconstructions, or think about how something like climate change would affect that place in the future. So this is another concept that can be used. Let's see. If you think about AR and spaces, so of course, outer spaces as well as indoor spaces can become virtual exhibition spaces. I can place data, I can place cultural objects anywhere, basically. So any place can become a place for learning, can become a place for exhibiting information. And so, for example, one project took a temporary closed art collection to a festival, or another project, in that case, it's in MoMA, they used the digital exhibition space to then implant sort of a guerrilla exhibition in the MoMA gallery without their consent. But you could also do it, of course, with the consent of the museum and then use the digital museum space differently. Or you could actually use AR as an exhibition planning tool. So that's the idea of curating room, where you could use online collections or digital collections to actually either plan your physical exhibition without actually having to touch the real objects and bring them in direct in the space, or you can actually also collaborate in curating kind of virtual exhibitions as a way to engage users and mediation. Of course, interaction is very important. Suddenly you can actually interact, at least virtually, with objects you usually cannot touch in a museum, which can go as far as that you're really physically engaged in a project, like, for example, mimicking a statue and then finding objects which are similar to that, so using search tools as well, or using audio AR, where you place audio in a 3D space and then use that for mediation. And we had a project, Eyes of Things, where we had this kind of hands-free audio guide where we used image recognition technology to actually detect what work we're interacting with and then give you some more audio information. Or there's also 3D audio where you can really sense where people are in a space and then really work with audio experiences there. And then, of course, in a lot of projects, if we think about multimedia guides or audio guides, we focus very much on activating knowledge, on methodologically guided interpretation, really giving information. And so the whole experience part and the whole perception part where the user really, first of all, himself or herself experiences something that is getting more and more in the background with mediated cultural learning. And so one hope also with augmented reality is to get that really more on the forefront again. So to really start like the association method in art pedagogy, for example, does on perceiving the space around you, on perceiving an artwork, and really, first of all, thinking for yourself, looking, actively exploring, and then only get to the next steps where information is given. And so also with Holomuse, we started to work on storytelling and curated storytelling directly at an object, but also we were then thinking, okay, where can it go further? How can we actually lead the gaze of a visitor towards specific details of a work? Or yeah, how we can use storytelling methods, giving different forms of multimedia, for example, zooming into details, highlighting details, having textual information, having auditive or visual information to really enhance the work or enhance the space. And then, yeah, give through storytelling also sort of a lead of the gaze. That can be combined with avatar-based storytelling as well. So that, for example, in that case, a ranger in a national park would directly be able to talk to a group of visitors like he would do in person, and then highlight also certain things at the location. And then, yeah, really having a real figure, also, for example, a figure out of a painting, telling you the story, being the expert, and guiding you through an object or through storytelling. And with one of the examples where we used this kind of curated storytelling, that was the Bruegel painting children's games at the Art Historic Museum in Vienna. And so the video shows how we went about. So we highlighted certain objects, we had storytelling behind it, we had storytelling going over, leading you over the image, highlighting certain experiences. So you see also in the corner below how such a highlight would look like through the lens. And there we used really the HoloLens so that you would have the hands-free and you would directly have information and points that lead your gaze embedded in your view. And so for the visitors, so we had also an evaluation there. And so for them, it was really a new kind of experience in its own right with AR. And that increased really the personal interest in the artwork as well. And also this kind of narrative supported the recall of visual details. But it was also clear that it was quite a young medium still. And for some people, especially with the HoloLens, difficult to handle at first. So this would really call for more support in the museum through staff that guides people through this kind of experience and how to deal with the technology. Another case study we worked at in the project was kind of a simulation app for an exhibition at the Deutsche Museum in Munich. And so that was for an exhibition on coffee. And here we have a kind of simulation game. It's a gamified situation where the user can grow a coffee plant, and that was inside the museum, inside an installation that was a coffee plantage, and you could grow your own coffee plant, also have influence on the climate, and then get sort of a feedback how the climate actually affects the results of how much coffee you get in the end. And so you can also take that game anywhere, basically, through a public app. And so also taking it to school classes, taking it to your living room, or here in a park in Vienna. And so this leads towards a concept of kind of a digital laboratory, which we find quite interesting. So that you can actually work with all kind of data, scientific data or cultural data, digital humanities data, and explore the data together, have gamified experiences around it, and really use that as a mediation tool. And so that leads me to summing up basically the value of cultural objects, or in general digital data in AR, before we go on how we can actually use that for smart cities. So basically, the places are quite important. So physical spaces can be enriched and objects can be enriched and become information hubs. Every place can basically become a place for learning and experimenting. So you can transfer objects or data in different educational settings or in public space. And also AR can be basically a lens for communicate, for on the one hand, framing your experience, but also a communication stimulus to talk about it, to use it for decision making. And also manipulation value is really important, the manipulation value of the data. So it's not just showing something or having it in use, but really being able to interact with the data. And with that, I lead over to Anna and how to transfer the concepts to smart cities.
Thank you, Florian. So actually, you can go to the next slide already, and then we can jump right in. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about one of our current research projects. In the first talk we heard today, Gerhard took us on a little trip to the past. I'm gonna take you now to the future. As climate changes and cities become hotter, we need to boost green infrastructure, especially in urban environments, to achieve positive effects on our microclimate, which impacts all of us. So with our research project GLARA, which stands for Green Living, Augmented and Virtual Reality, we are with 3 partners who are experts in different fields like urban planning or climate data analysis, trying to create a mobile application that uses AR and VR to convey complex, abstract and complicated microclimate data in an intuitive and understandable way. So we utilize AR and VR as a lens and as a frame of reference for scientific concepts like thermal load score. What is that? And present that in an intuitive and engaging way that makes you want to dive into these important subject matters. The second part is that we also want to use this app as a new tool for civic participation in urban development. And we know that change comes from the people and politics is sometimes very slow to react. So we want to make this new tool available for participation in urban planning. Florian, next slide, please. So GLARA takes comprehensive analysis and complex data, which normally looks like things like the one to the left on your screen, which is meant for experts in the field and uses not only terms that might not be known, but also 2D simple graphics that can only be interpreted by experts mostly and is not suitable for the broader public. So our team mates at Green for Cities, they use innovative planning tools like GreenPass for analysis for data experts, which is currently used in biddings for architectural development projects, for example. So what do? We take, next slide, please, these data and turn it into something more like this. I want to emphasize that this is a preliminary sketch because we are only in the very early stages of our project. We started last November and the project will run through October 2022. So we are now in the stage where we conduct stakeholder interviews and are preparing for our first mock-ups and further development. So the visualization is not final, just to take this abstract concept of this climate data app and make it into something a little more tangible. I want to invite you to a little thought experiment. Let's imagine you live somewhere in an inner city street of Old Town Vienna, and your street is set to be revitalized. Or maybe you're planning to move to a new area, maybe on the outskirts of the city, where there's a completely new development going on. Either way, you care about effects on your living quality and you want to have an impact. So we want to take Glara and make it a tool for all people who are residents, who are interested in urban development, who are just interested in the effects of green assets on microclimate. And we want to give you a tool that can give you this information anywhere, anytime, and make complex themes easy and intuitive. Because there are some drawbacks with classic participation tools. If you think of conventional participation, most of the time you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, maybe not right now with Corona, but if we think back to our lives like a few weeks ago. So maybe you have little kids, you can't go out in the evening and you can't be part of it. So it only represents a fraction of the population. Also, the materials used are often difficult to understand. So this is where Glara comes in. You open the app, you see some predefined scenarios, and you see what effects they would have on your microclimate and how it would affect you. So as Florian mentioned before, in the museum context, we take physical objects. In this context, it's not an artwork, but maybe it's your building, your street, and they become information hubs. So the street can become a place for learning and for experiencing information and data. You can control the settings. So think of it like a little video game. If you're in an area that already exists, if it's a revitalization project, through your phone screen and through the camera, you see how it looks right now. And we have 2D and 3D overlays like green assets, visual elements, shadows, composite parameters like the felt temperature. And you can walk around as it will look different in the spring and in the summer than it does in the winter. And can you still hear me? Because it says my connection is unstable.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
But please, slowly but surely come to an end.
Yeah, I will hurry up.
Thank you.
So you can control certain settings. So we utilize all kinds of functions in your phone to create an immersive AR and MR experience. The app will have a modular design. So you have an AR module for revitalization areas that works with surface detection and GPS integration. You have a VR model where you can walk in ergo perspective, like in a video game, you can walk through your area. And AR and VR provide a lens into this different reality, a glimpse into the future or a possible future, and a frame of reference that hopefully stimulates communication in groups and makes green assets a starting point for dialogues between users, the residents, and city officials. So to summarize, our main objectives in this current research project are, we are doing 2 case studies where we are assessing target group specific requirements, and the gathered insights will inform the development of target group specific business models for the planned market rollout. And of course, we will be developing the modular app and the participation methods. Yep, thank you. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you so much. Sorry that I had to interrupt you a little bit. It's very interesting. I think you could go on and would not lose the audience because, and it's really, I like also how the story arc of this whole panel went very, very nicely. So thank you for this glimpse into the future. There's already a question from Sylvia. Silvia, do you want to have it yourself, or shall I take it?
She's not on the podium anymore.
Oh, she's not on the podium, so I will read it to you. The holistic experience. Did you think about other senses like smelling and feeling as well? Or how holistic is an experience actually? I also came across this expression, holistic. I mean, it's like very holy.
That's true. I mean, holistic experience, of course, because you have the physical world as part of it. So sort of holistic for me is bridging the physical world with the digital and thinking of it as one experience. And of course, smell and touch, haptic experiences, everything is part of our experience of the physical world. And of course, that plays into it. Question is how much you can control it in certain situations, especially if you think about your home environment. There, of course, what you can control as a designer of that kind of experience is limited. But of course, all the senses are part of a holistic experience. Yeah.
Mm. And in Clara, we are thinking about, well, we can't really incorporate them physically, but we are trying to trigger some your responses from your body or from your memories. Like we are thinking about and conceptualizing how to integrate, for example, heat spots in the AR experience with overlays or maybe with some 3D sound elements. And because you've already for sure experienced a hot summer in the city, or you like can't even deal almost. So we are thinking about how to maybe evoke some feelings and bridge that gap in even another dimension. So, yeah.
Okay, there is a question from Gerhard. Are you still on the podium, Gerhard?
Yes, of course I am.
Okay.
I'd like to know, this Clara app is very interesting, especially for me in Graz, because we have all these discussions with the microclimate and so on very often, and urban planning. Where do you think the data will come from? Will it be created locally, for example, with a thermometer on the mobile phone, or do you want to get them from a global database? Are you planning to introduce simulation, emulation for this temperature and all the environmental data? This would be interesting for me.
Mm-hmm. Our partner Green for Cities, they have already a product on the market called GreenPass, which is being used already in architectural competitions and all kinds of other certifications. And they use, they have all kinds of data setups to gather the data, and then they run simulations. And they, for example, do a summer day, and then one day in autumn, and so on. So they collect the data, and they have very complicated AI algorithms, and I can't even explain it to you. They have tried to explain it to us. It's fascinating, really, and I've learned many more new terms. But yeah, so for the case studies, we are working closely with one case study is a completely new development project so there's like nothing there now. So we are working with the developers and have all their data and their plans and the climate data we are measuring, and GreenPass is providing certification as part of the study. And for the revitalization project, the same. We are working closely with the city officials here and gathering our own data. So it only works, we are talking about like one block of a street. We are not talking about a whole city here. So especially for the case studies now. So the data would have to be collected. Or maybe if then there is some open source data by then, that's great.
There's also a question from Mario from the Q&A section. Does the app itself facilitate the dialogue, or does it mainly raise awareness?
It facilitates a dialogue. we want to make it a new tool for participation. We thought about it a lot, like there were some development stages. At the beginning, we were thinking of letting people design their own scenarios, like in The Sims, but we quickly had to throw that overboard because our developers were like, how, that's not possible. And we also didn't want to overcomplicate it for the users. So we will have predefined scenarios, and there will be some kind of voting and feedback mechanisms in the app, because it's a focus that we want to be a solution for people who maybe can't participate in standard like participation tools where you meet up in the evening because you have little kids, you can't go out. So we want to build a new participation tool.
Wonderful. Okay, are there any questions from the panel? No, thank you, says Mario. Because I really like that also your example, Roberto, with the visually impaired people being included, and also your green tool, AR tool. I think this is really something from the Exchange, what we also wanted to accomplish from the Exchange Reality conference, to make some difference with AR tools, because normally it's more like a technical tool, and I mean, a technical tool is indifferent. You can do something good with it, you can do something bad with it, or misuse it. So I'm very happy that you brought up also these examples. Maybe let me ask a question to Roberto, because you were not able to talk. How did you get the idea to do this, and how did people who are visually impaired react to your application?
So what I presented is from the state of art. Until now, I just interviewed 72 visually impaired people who used to go to museums, and we tried to understand their past experiences, what was good, what was bad, and the main focus of my work is trying to understand what will be the ideal museum for them. Before COVID, I was supposed to try to start prototyping, and because I'm using a participatory design methodology, I tried to work with them very closely, but because of the COVID, now I'm I'm stuck for working with the people, but I'm trying to analyze the data I have from the conversations I had with them, and create a framework. And hopefully, I hope in the next month, maybe start to prototype and work with people and get direct feedback from the interaction with physical things, not just hear about their past experiences. Try to prototype and co-design with them, basically.
Yes. Wonderful. So I hope you will get to work then, and also are able to test your application as soon as. I mean, this is like for everyone. I mean,
yes,
you can prototype, you can conceptualize, but to get in touch with the users, this locked on has to end someday somewhere.
Yes.
Okay, are there any further questions? So then I would say, Thomas, do you have any questions?
Not a question, but just an advertisement probably for tomorrow. So as you all know, tomorrow is the next conference streaming, also starting at 1:30 p.m. We will have tomorrow the second session of our Exchange Reality conference part, which will be about XR for industry and XR for healthcare. And we again will have 3 paper presentations tomorrow in the early afternoon. Yeah, and I hope that a lot of you actually will be there also tomorrow. And yeah, I think we have one actually question coming up in between.
Oh, okay.
And it's a question to Florian, actually. Florian, perhaps you can just answer it directly. Where do you see the benefit shortcomings in the use of glasses compared to mobile AR devices?
The benefits are definitely that you don't have this kind of device in between you. You don't have a barrier where you look through, but still there's a technological barrier because you have to hold it in your hands. It's getting heavy after some time. And so the experience is more focused on the technology versus with the glassware. It still has shortcomings, but in an ideal world, once the glassware is developed to a more robust state, which will eventually happen in the next few years, that's at least our prediction since major companies are working on it. So then you really have sort of the information layer in your vision layer. So that's at least the outlook for the future, where this would be a more ideal reception scenario and user scenario for AR. Of course, the shortcomings of glassware are right now, on the one hand, they are technically not that great to use yet. Talking about viewing angles, talking, about all kind of shortcomings you have to design around. And they're really expensive. So having these kind of devices as a lone device for a museum right now basically is hindered by costs. If you think about a HoloLens costs nearly 4,000 euro a piece. So
do you have the HoloLens 2 already? Because we are waiting for it.
No, we don't have it yet.
Does anyone have it yet?
So, but yeah, this is really like, if you think about lone devices, this is prohibitive. So there is really where mobile AR right now comes into play, because it's integratable into existing apps and it's ready to use basically. So that's, yeah, a little bit the comparison between those two.
Okay.
So thank you very much for this valuable input. Sylvia also says it's very valuable for the hackathon, because we were talking about some of the topics already in the morning. And with this input, I think we can go much further. And for those who are participants of the hackathon, we will meet at the campfire at 4:30 p.m. So in about 1 hour. And for those who are participants only for the conference, we will see each other hopefully tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Thank you very much for your talks, also for being here. I think it was a wonderful experience to have this virtual conference. It was my first panel. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Congratulations to all.
Bye.
Bye.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
See you.